So the topic today for the RISE AmeriCorps request for proposals is member insight management. Probably familiar now with me, Adam, the staff member for the Server I Commission for National Community Service. And helping me today is Amanda Forget. We, of course, have a few specific learning goals today. We're going to increase our understanding of the AmeriCorps member experience, have an increased knowledge of service site responsibilities, where the AmeriCorps member serves, and be prepared to address some of the application questions in the AmeriCorps grant, specifically around AmeriCorps member management. So AmeriCorps provides specifically a human capital resource, the AmeriCorps member, and authorizes a national service position with the benefit of the Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award, as well as providing some funding toward the cost of that AmeriCorps member and the overall project. But it's specifically a human capital resource. We named the grant the Rhode Island Service Experience AmeriCorps grant, specifically to emphasize the creation of this AmeriCorps position. The RFP says that the purpose of the grant is to, quote, AmeriCorps grants are awarded to eligible organizations proposing to recruit and manage AmeriCorps participants, commonly called AmeriCorps members, to tackle Rhode Island's most pressing challenges, end quote. So it's really important to understand that the service experience is equally or more important than the community outcome. So without the AmeriCorps member or team of members, there won't be any project delivered. And just as a practical matter, there's an entire section of the application, member management, that's worth 24 points. So here are some of the key activities in AmeriCorps. You're taking on a project where you will recruit, train, place, and supervise a team of AmeriCorps members. One of the biggest challenges we see for folks writing applications is that they will say that they do these things, but they don't necessarily tell us how. They will recruit, how you will recruit, how you will train, how you will place, and how you will supervise the AmeriCorps members. I really feel like the slide here, recruit, train, place, and supervise, along with some of its bullets, is probably enough almost to end the presentation about what we're trying to emphasize should be part of your application. But since we have an hour, we're going to dig into a few more details. The first one was recruitment, right? So just to be clear, grant recipients are responsible for recruiting their own AmeriCorps members. While AmeriCorps maintains an application website, my.americorps.gov, and joins with ServerI to promote awareness of AmeriCorps service opportunities. Unfortunately, we don't keep AmeriCorps members in our pockets, ready to just hand over or come off an assembly line. You have to fill, the language we use, your awarded positions. Your relationship with AmeriCorps members and their experience will begin with your recruitment process. You'll need to make sure you have a clear position description, a strategy for marketing the opportunity, an actual application process, which might include an application form, the requirement to submit a resume, a standardized interview process, and you might include partners, potentially host site partners or a selection committee in that process. You'll receive training from the commission at ServerI on how to conduct national service criminal history checks, which need to be part of your process, how we verify citizenship or residency status so that you know an individual is eligible to serve in AmeriCorps, and how we go about actually enrolling individuals in AmeriCorps using e-grants, the same system that you're using to apply for funding. Because the AmeriCorps members are a diverse bunch. Just to remind you, the basic requirements for participating in AmeriCorps are given to us in federal legislation. Participants can be age 17 and older. They must have must be currently working towards a high school diploma or have received a high school diploma. Certainly the majority of members in Rhode Island have some college or college degree, but it's not a requirement. Participants must be citizens or have permanent resident status. Participants must go through the criminal history screening to help safeguard the recipients of services and other AmeriCorps members. And organizations get to determine what other characteristics and skills are needed to implement their specific projects. In Serverized State Service Plan, we highlight some principles that we aspire to. One of them is inclusion, as we define it here on the presentation slide. This applies to the communities we serve, but also to AmeriCorps members, the individuals who make up our teams. There's probably no prescribed or secret method to achieve inclusion. Again, it's a principle that we aspire to. But we'll expect to see some communication in the application relevant to this topic. In terms of inclusion, we can all reflect on geography, attracting applicants from outside our state versus from the same local community where the project is delivered. We can reflect on age. Not every AmeriCorps member needs to be 20 to 24 years old. In fact, you may not know that adults who start service at age 55 or older in AmeriCorps are allowed to transfer their education award that's earned through service to their children or grandchildren as an additional benefit to encourage older adults to serve as AmeriCorps members. We can also reflect on how culture, language, and identity may improve the delivery of services and the engagement of the beneficiaries of the project. And we can reflect on the long-time commitment that AmeriCorps has had to engage people with disabilities in service positions by designing positions that are universally welcome to all, or by providing accommodations to those who serve. Grant reviewers will be very curious to see if you have reflected on how your recruitment process connects with your overall program design. What are you looking for in an AmeriCorps member? Do you have characteristics for your ideal AmeriCorps member in terms of their knowledge, skills, or education so that they can carry out the service you intend? Their past experience, where they are in their professional or, again, just age journey, the geography that you intend to recruit AmeriCorps members from, and what their interests are. What do you imagine are their motivations and interests for joining the program? Name characteristics will also help you think through what you need to do for training, which was our second phase there. Training is not just the topics of what the AmeriCorps members will be exposed to or learn. It's also explaining how the planning process was carried out, who was involved in planning, what's the timeline, what's the method of delivery for the training, questions that relate to how. It also requires knowing who's well suited to provide the training that you require. The who. Is it grantee staff or outside consultants? Do you have partners who will provide some of the training? Do you have access to some fancy new online system? And do these systems or trainers have experience working with older adult learners? And do the AmeriCorps members themselves have some voice or choice in the training that they will receive during the year or during the term of service? One of the training categories that you'll hear the Server I Commission talk a lot about is civic reflection. Again, we have a principle in our state service plan that we identify as leadership, but we use civic reflection in the definition. At the end of the day, when we talk about civic reflection, we're fundamentally asking, is there time set aside for AmeriCorps members to speak with each other about their service? Yeah, we'll just leave it there. Is reflection integrated in some way into your schedule? Is there a process of journaling, a meeting that occurs at a periodic timetable, or a special activity or event? The Rhode Island Commission, ServeRI, has committed for almost 20 years now to provide all AmeriCorps members across the state a specialized experience we call Justice Talks, where we create small groups of AmeriCorps members for a series of sessions historically between January and March, halfway through a service year for the majority of AmeriCorps members, where they have conversations about their service and how it relates to the community needs in Rhode Island. A sense of, depends on it's driven by the AmeriCorps members. So they may talk about issues of race and identity, of community and belonging, current events that they want to debrief with each other, or systems of power they see at work structurally affecting the change that they're trying to achieve through their service. Place. Some of you will propose AmeriCorps members to be serving from your office and organization directly. Others will be placing them with partners out in the community. So depending on how much information, how complicated your program design is and how many people are involved, there are places where you're asked to provide more information about that relationship with site partners. Some of the things we commonly expect are a process to enter into formal memorandums of understanding with site partners that might include data agreements. It might include explaining how supervisors, either again at your own location or amongst site service sites, are prepared, how they are, after the grant is awarded, how do they get up to speed on what AmeriCorps is, what the intention of the project is, and the systems of management of the AmeriCorps members that will be in place. If part of the idea is that AmeriCorps members are going to be traveling or engaging in teleservice, how are you going to monitor that the AmeriCorps members are being supported, that the roles are appropriate to the position description you developed, and don't involve prohibited activities, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be supervising AmeriCorps members. And because it's a human capital resource and humans are fundamentally emotional and messy, there's going to need to be an effort to provide care and feeding throughout the course of the AmeriCorps member experience. You might ask yourself if you have thought about how you might build a team and a camaraderie, an esprit de corps, which is where the AmeriCorps language comes from in its name, among the individuals who are serving with you. Are there systems where you will support their individual development? You may not know yet, but AmeriCorps requires a performance evaluation written and documented of the AmeriCorps member. And so you might have a process for completing that evaluation and discussing it with the member. You might have opportunities for coaching or mentoring. And most fun of all, as your term of service ends, or on an ongoing basis even, how do you recognize the accomplishments of the AmeriCorps member and thank and celebrate them the same way that you would do in a strong volunteer, community volunteer program, where recognition is a key piece of running a strong volunteer experience. And when you're talking about supervision, remember there has to be a person who is the supervisor. So identifying who will supervise is very important. We want to know that there's a sufficient system in place to provide guidance and support so that the AmeriCorps members can provide effective service. And that the AmeriCorps members have an opportunity to give feedback and have a voice in some aspect, right, of the work that they're doing, carrying out. When I say work, of course, I mean service. So it's my responsibility to highlight for you prohibited activities. We anticipate that you will have a way of safeguarding that AmeriCorps members do not engage in prohibited activities, which are defined in the legislation as political activity and advocacy, religious activity, voter registration, pairing, collective bargaining. That's, getting involved in, it's okay to be involved in union activities, but not to interfere with union activities. To not provide any benefit to a for-profit business. And in terms of family planning, there are limitations to what an AmeriCorps member can engage in terms of reproductive health. So let me know if there are questions about that. At the end of the day, the really big idea is that members need to be well-trained and well-supported so that we can ensure that the service can take place. Are there questions? That is the conclusion of the main information that I wanted to share today. There is a little bit more I'm going to go through. Are there specific questions yet? I'm going to check into the chat, which is empty. Just a few more things. This is the part where I might call for some engagement from those of you on the phone. So be ready. The application, I know this is small to read perhaps, but the application itself the instructions provided for competing for an AmeriCorps grant this year have a section called Member Management. And in the scoring rubric, that entire section is worth 24 points, consisting of 8 questions. So you can do the math there. So these questions are, how will you recruit and select AmeriCorps members? Do you have a plan to recruit AmeriCorps members from the geographic or demographic communities in which the project operates? How will you foster an inclusive service culture? What is your training plan? How will AmeriCorps members be supervised? What skills and experiences will AmeriCorps members gain as a result of their training and service that will help them in their future employment? How will AmeriCorps members be provided opportunities to reflect on service? And how will they be recognized for their contributions? So you can see that all the information that I tried to cover just a little while ago speaks directly to these questions that are part of the application. Now, our scoring rubric that is used by an external set of panels has been simplified to awarding 1, 2, or 3 points to each of the questions that I just shared. And it starts, 0 would be a determination that there is no response, or it does not meet, does not even partially meet a solid response or the criteria. But then we have, take a minute to look at this slide. Partially meets criterion. The response addressed some aspects of what's being talked about, but there are not significant strengths. Meets criterion. It's a quality response that addresses most of the topic, and there are substantial strengths. And exceeds. It's very high quality, lots of detail, and there are substantial strengths and high confidence from the reviewer that there will be successful results. That makes sense, and I hope that you've already seen this by reviewing the RFP. So question, I'd like you to read, just put you on the spot. I would like folks to read the slide. Here we have a response in an AmeriCorps application to that first question in the member management section. How will you recruit and select AmeriCorps members? And I want you to tell me if you would score that with a 1, 2, or 3, 3 again being the highest. 1 being the partially meets our criteria. I'm going to pause for a minute and then see if I can see any response in the chat for how you would score it, or if you want to unmute yourself and shout out a number. I'm getting answers of 2 or possibly 1. It wasn't meant to be necessarily a trick. From my perspective, if I was the external reviewer, I would probably give this response a 1. It says, how will you recruit and select AmeriCorps members? Our agency announce open positions on the website, and we'll use Handshake, and we'll have them complete an application and an interview to see if they're a good fit. There's a lot here about the what is going to happen and what are some of the places that things will be posted, but there isn't quite a bit of detail on how or who is involved in making sure that AmeriCorps members are recruited and selected. So I think that the next slide, which I know is a lot to see on a slide, but you will also have these slides available for you. Again, this is not perfect. It's just meant to be a rough example, typed out, you know, a little bit in a hurry for this specific presentation, just of transparency. But to me, this next slide is really what needs to be there to achieve a 2 in that competition. There's an acknowledgement first and foremost that right now is a very difficult time to hire or recruit individuals for work or service. There's an identification of who will be involved. There are some additional plans besides internet sites that are mentioned for strategies for recruitment. And there is reference to a selection committee of some kind where we know that applicants will all go through a standardized set of questions, which demonstrates a fair process. And there is also information that there are different accommodations that the agency is prepared to make to help different individuals should they need it, whether that be due to language or perhaps an individual with disability, as not everyone may be able to access the online application. Not everyone may be prepared or familiar with Zoom, as sort of suggested in this longer response. But to achieve a 3, I don't even know yet if this would achieve a 3, but you can just tell by the font in the size of the font that this is a longer answer and provides more information. It provides a higher degree of confidence that the strategies make sense for this particular program. For example, it says here that they're going to be looking at former volunteers, residents in the target community, and they're going all out, whether it be job listservs or internet sites, paper flyers, newsletters, as well as approaching a particular relationship with Rhode Island College and a professor who has skill sets that they probably have identified as characteristics they hope their AmeriCorps members will have. But it's really the selection process that has more detail than the previous responses. They identify what qualities they'll be looking for in that selection process. Again, the accommodations that are available and some additional information about how they will do recruitment in a way that helps folks that are applying get some better sense of what AmeriCorps is before and what they're really getting into before committing to participate. It also makes reference to conducting national service criminal history checks and how there isn't a lot of detail, but it makes reference to a challenge that can exist in program participation where you identify the individual, you select them and welcome them, and you let them know that in 6 weeks, everyone's going to start as part of a team, and you lose them in that 6 weeks period. they also accept 2 other positions and they kind of decide to do something else. We do not like the term, but a lot of folks describe this as ghosting. So it tries to address that attrition idea as well. So there is an intent here to be very thoughtful about recruitment, I think. Certainly, there could always be even more improvement in the response, but are there any comments or reflections on those 3 slides where we try to very specifically hone in on the application itself and the type of information that might be helpful to be successful in the scoring? I'm going to stop recording for the benefit of conversation with folks that are here today. Everyone knows that the final due date for this year's AmeriCorps RISE competition is April 7th. And the commission is available to continue to provide technical assistance and address questions you have about the application requirements or about the process of applying through eGrants, the federal grant and member management system provided by AmeriCorps. Go. I'm trying.